I'm Paul Schroeder. I work with Shap at Proseed. I would just like to underline a point that David made at the beginning of his talk, and that is that how important propagation is to a tree breeding program. You can have the best tree in the world, but if you're not able to propagate it either by grafting or by cuttings, it doesn't really have a lot of value to the program. Anyway, just want to go over a little bit of what we have been doing at Proseed with the material from the NZDFI.
We are not supposed to use next slide.
Oh, that's the pointer, right? Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, no, that's fine.
That's fine. That's the next slide.
Oh, okay.
And that's the pointer.
Oh, okay, great. Yep, thanks. Okay, we're doing propagation both by grafting and by cuttings. The value of propagating by grafting, we're propagating by grafting to establish seed orchards, and that way we can have the improved material all brought together so that it's interbreeding, and you're getting further genetic gain from the interbreeding of the selected individuals in the program. Disadvantage of grafting, of course, is that it is quite slow. It's sort of like about 3 years before you get the plants established in the field, and then you might be waiting as long again for the trees to develop some size and start producing a significant quantity of seed. And another disadvantage with grafting is that we're already seeing some issues with incompatibility with the eucalypts. Some of the clones, like our fastigata, I've pretty much written them off because we've tried and tried to graft them, and we just have a low level of success, and it's difficult to get a good number of them in our orchard establishment. And of course with grafting, you would never use the technique for commercial production of planting stock. It's just too expensive. We've established three orchard plantings at Amberley. This quadrangulata was put in just this last spring. I wasn't too sure about choosing this photograph. It was taken just after Cyclone Debbie and there was water everywhere. I assure you that the site is not that badly drained. Last summer we grafted some selections from the Eucalyptus globoidea family trial down in the Wairarapa. We got a good, we didn't get the best take with this species. It's proved a little more difficult than some of the others that we've been working with. But nevertheless, we did get a good number of clones, but just low numbers on each of them. So those have been planted into an archive for further propagation. That's the same Bosistoana Orchard that Shaf showed you at the beginning of today. This is a recent photo. The trees there are about 18 months old, and if you can remember the original photo, they have grown quite considerably. The orchard is not well stocked in terms of positions planted, but we're kind of holding off because we're expecting more selections to come out of the Bosistoana program, and we will be using those for making up the numbers in the orchard. Grafting and of course propagation by cuttings. It's a very good technique if you're wanting to produce a lot of material from selections out of the program. With the eucalypts at least, it's technically difficult, particularly with older material. These are the photographs are from cuttings that we took from the Harewood trial area in Christchurch summer before the one just gone. and the plants on the right are rooted cuttings that we have used for further studies in the nursery. At the end of 2015, my assistant Marie and myself were able to visit Narromine Nursery in Australia, and we had a look at David Cliff's operation over there. Some of you will remember David addressing this group a year or two ago, and it really was a revelation for the both of us. Some of the the top left picture is the early stool bed setup that David was using for producing cutting material for propagation. Unfortunately, that very fine facility was destroyed in a cyclone, and the picture on the top right is kind of like the remnants of it. But they have changed their style of production from a grow bag type of setup there, and they now have their stools grown in individual pots. Everything is still being fed by hydroponics, so those bags on the left would be filled with coir, and it was, I think if I remember rightly, Marie, it was they're using a coir media again in these pots. Bottom left, you can see the propagation facility. They have bottom heated beds there. They were using circulating warm water to heat the beds. There are fogging nozzles to apply the misting, and the bottom right you can see some of the cuttings that we helped them do some settings while we were there.
What species are they?
I think that was grandis, wasn't it? Yeah, Eucalyptus grandis. Yeah, so we came back all fired up and we thought, yep, we can do this. And that is our very first go. It was just a single heat pad that we set up. There's the first settings that we did on the left there. You'll see that we've prepared the cuttings pretty much as we saw in Australia. And on the right is some of the rooted material. Some of that material with cutting propagation, with eucalypts, most of the big operations overseas are producing their cutting material from hydroponic stools. And so we thought, well, we'd better get our head around this, and it has been quite a learning curve for me. I've never had anything to do with hydroponics before, and so it's been a lot to learn. But anyway, this was what we set up with the rooted cuttings that you saw before. Set up some stool beds there. That was it was planted in mid-June, which is kind of like winter time, but a lot of pressure on us to produce a result quickly, so that was what we did. And then the end of October, 19 weeks later, that was the growth that we got. It was really successful in terms of growth, and that was most encouraging. However, it wasn't all plain sailing. There were some issues around getting the correct nutrients to the trees, and also with the indoor environment. You'll notice that the greenhouse has white plastic film on it for shading, so that we were able to control temperatures the better during the heat of summer. But in the wintertime, of course, it meant the light levels were low, and so the quality of the foliage that was growing was not particularly good. It was thin and it didn't have much of a waxy cuticle. We also had problems with the trees not getting enough trace elements, and you can see the yellowing there is manganese, iron, copper deficiencies we identified in the material. So I still have to address that. That's an ongoing project. you can see there, when we first set it up, we were recycling the nutrient and just topping up the nutrient levels based on a measurement of the salinity of the water. But it is of limited value. Over a period of time, what was happening was that the salt levels, I think that one there is chlorine, started to climb very, very quickly with continually putting chemicals into the water. The salinity was correct, but it wasn't the correct chemicals there. You can also see how the trace elements have run down very quickly. And when you look at the growth of the trees, it's very easy to understand how it's happening. This was an earlier study that we did with some students of David Long's. We had a number of these little gully systems, and there were different nutrient solutions circulating through them. After a period of about 4 months, you can see that there was some quite considerable growth there. But when we pulled it apart and threw it away, this was the wad of roots that we found in the bottom of these gullies. It was just like willows growing along a stream bank, and knowing that, I could quite understand, because what we found with the nutrients when we were measuring them, there was the nutrient solution was going into the grow bags, and then we took samples of the water that was draining out and had that analysed, and virtually in that first run through, those eucalypt roots were stripping out all of the micronutrient that was available. So at the moment, when we've changed it from a recirculating system to a run to waste, so that we can be sure that there's a quality nutrient feed going to the trees at all times. That said, it was fairly obvious that the indoor environment wasn't really the best for producing good, strong cutting material. Last year we were on an International Plant Propagator Society field trip, and we visited K&L Nurseries in Templeton in Christchurch. They grow roses, they grow gerberas, but they grow their roses in a hydroponic gully system, a little bit more, a bit bigger than what we had been dabbling with. But I saw this and I thought, yes, that's what we need to have a go at. And so that is what we have done. That's the Proseed version there. When I get back to Amberley, we'll be establishing some material in that, and we'll be looking to produce some cutting material for further work in the spring out of that. We'll also be using this setup to play around with the nutrient levels and getting all of that sorted out. The big program for the summer just gone, of course, was to support the work in Woodville. Our brief was to produce 5 to 6 rooted cuttings each of 1,000 to 2,000 selections out of the first of the Bosistoana trials that was planted. And then we were hoping for maybe 18 rooted cuttings from a subset of those for establishing some clonal trials. So we set up a facility that would be big enough to do it. This is what we built. On the right, you can see the bottom heat facility. We put a series of nuclear bottom heat pads. It's the same sort of material that is used for demisting your bathroom mirror. They also sell them for warming up your home brew. So you can write that down if you want. The fabric over the top, it's just a polypropylene geotextile. We use that to act like a capillary mat, and it just helps eliminate pooling and puddling of water on the surface of the propagation pad. It was really quite an exercise to get the material down. We knew from our work with the grafting and storage of scions that it was best that we got the material down to Amberley and set in the greenhouse as quickly as possible, preferably within about 3 days. We looked at some options like that, and it was going to cost us an arm and a leg to send it down by air freight. So we got talking to the people at Cool Trans, and we got a deal going with them where we could bring down pallets of material packed in polystyrene fish boxes, and they gave us an overnight service with very generous assistance from Murray's Nurseries in Woodville. The material was delivered to the depot in Palmerston North at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and by 9 o'clock the next morning I was collecting it in Amberley for taking to the nursery and setting. So that worked really well. We were very pleased with that. These are the settings. These photos were taken about a fortnight ago. Marie tells me that there's the first. Well, we did 2 settings. We did some in February, and we did another setting in March. And the first setting, they were starting to root when I left. The effect has been quite clonal. You can, oops, go back. You can see there's rows of each row of cuttings there is pretty much a different clone. Some of them there might be 2 or 3 rows there. You can see one group there which is all one clone, and that one's doing very well. It looks like we might get nearly 100% strike on that. And then you get other areas here that aren't looking nearly as happy. There's quite a bit of learning there. We might have to rethink the way we do the settings. We've put everything into a rather large single tray because normally with this sort of propagation in a nursery, that's what you do. But what I had overlooked was that with the large number of clones, there would inevitably be clonal variation, and it makes difficulties for managing the cuttings. Like we need to pot up one clone, but we don't want to be disturbing a slower one that is alongside of it. Just looking to the future. This will be our work for next year. You'll have noticed on the last slide that the figures I gave, while it wasn't a bad effort, it was still not the target that we were hoping for, and actually need to show to justify the government funding that has been given to us. So we're going to have to revisit, go back to those selections, gather more material and make another setting in the spring. And then of course we've got the second trial that was planted a year later, and there will be collections to be taken from that. The only thing that I would say is what we do have to do with this next setting is that we do have to improve the timing of our program. This is sort of these figures show the strike from a number of settings that we did in our very first effort. This is the Harewood material, and really what that graph is trying to show is that our best success was in the December-January period, when temperatures were high, when the day length was long and the light was intense. Once we get down to the February-March period, our strike success is starting to fall away, and this next time around I want to avoid that. The development of the stools, these are some of the stools that were collected from Harewood, and that is the type of coppice growth that we are looking for to get the material that we need to be sure of a good propagation. We can't take the very small shoots, they're too soft. We have to wait for the shoots to develop and to ripen and harden up. And that period is kind of like at least 2 months. So the material this year, because of operational considerations, was topped in the sort of like November and December, and it would be good if we could actually bring that forward a little bit. And yes, the setting system, I've already spoken about that. Next time around I might consider doing the selection, setting them in punnets so that we can handle the material a little more flexibly. So there's been an awful lot of stuff happening at Proseed. It's been really quite exciting for all of us that are involved with it, and I look forward to producing a good result next season. Thank you.